who's the dead last worst starter and then not even a starter, has a huge contract. How are you going to get rid of him? Well, because he's a good locker room guy. No, he wasn't. He was leaking to the press, or at least it was being leaked to the press, the day Jalen Hurts made his first start as a pro for the Eagles. If Carson Wentz, he has no interest in being a backup. If he's not starting, he wants a trade. Really, Sherlock? Carson Wentz doesn't want to be a backup? Who does who's a starter? Of course not. But other guys take their benching like leaders and support the other guy and wait until the time is right when they get the ball and perform and lead. That's not what Carson Wentz did. He sowed division in the team. He created a problem. So that guy, who's going to be a problem potentially in the locker room, who just undermined his team after underperforming every starter in the league, that guy, you're going to get rid of that contract? Not only did they get rid of the contract, they got a third rounder this year. Okay, that's not a great return for a starting quarterback or a guy they want to start, but also a conditional second round pick next year could become a first. So in this draft, they have 4 picks in the top 100. By the way, who knows how low Justin Fields will drop? And they don't have to drop that low for the Eagles to grab him. Or they could just take some really good players with those picks, surround Jalen Hurts, and if it doesn't work out, if they don't like what they see, they bring in a veteran to compete against him, then next year they're going to have a lot of draft capital too. They can draft a quarterback next year. The Eagles lost? No, they got out of this looking clean.
Even if they got out of it looking clean, when you're trying to decipher who's a winner or loser, it's in comparison to somebody. You can't have a loser without having a winner. So if you want to just compartmentalize and focus on the Philadelphia Eagles, then we can listen to your diatribe and say nothing. But the fact of the matter is there's somebody that got Wentz. Who got Wentz? What kind of situation is he walking into? That's going to define whether it's a winner or loser. Of course, the Eagles are better off without Carson Wentz. We understand that. But in terms of deciphering who's a loser in all of this, as it pertains to the Philadelphia Eagles, I'm thinking about the team that got Carson Wentz, and that's the Indianapolis Colts. An Indianapolis Colts team with an elite defensive line that even with a down year because of injuries was still ranked 7th according to Pro Football Focus. A team that took a guy in Carson Wentz that was sacked 50 times last year in Philadelphia. They protected Phillip Rivers. He only got sacked 19 times. Okay? He only got touched a little bit, like 31 or 32 times. I'm thinking about Jonathan Taylor being able to run the football. Even though Miles Sanders and Boston Scott could run the football, Doug Peterson wasn't calling running plays for them, at least to the degree and frequency that we would like. I'm thinking about, even though T.Y. Hilton is going to be a free agent once next month rolls around, you look at Pittman and Pascal and some of those guys, and they've got some talent at the wideout spot. You got Frank Reich, who was your offensive coordinator when you were 11-2. And relevant as an MVP candidate in 2017. Now as your head coach, which is why the Colts made the offer, because Frank Reich said, this dude is not as bad as people think. He's not as bad as he looked last year. I know him. I coached him. Bring him here. Let me have him. And so you got to look at those things and look at the personnel. A top 10 defense, a top 10 offense, fresh off an appearance in the postseason. If you're the Indianapolis Colts, where you lost to the Buffalo Bills 27-24, it was a close game. I'm looking at the Indianapolis Colts getting a guy like Carson Wentz, who's only 28 years of age, if he can be fixed, and Frank Reich is considered a quarterback fixer to some degree. I got news for you. I think it's a plus for the Indianapolis Colts. I think they win in all of this. I do.
Yeah, look, I understand both sides of this, and Max saying that the Eagles are winners. I was one saying that there's no way they're going to trade this contract. I mean, they give him $128 million, 66.5 just to sign his name. They guaranteed that, and the Eagles paid that. So the winners in this would probably be the Eagles getting rid of the contract, but the losers would be the management that drafted him high in the first round and then decided to give him that massive contract. That should have an asterisk by whoever was the one that said, yes, let's draft him, let's pay him this, and then let's trade him away and try and get rid of the guy that we thought was going to be the next franchise quarterback here. So there's winners and losers in it all. And I understand what Stephen A. is saying about the Colts, and it all depends on how Carson Wentz does. If he goes to the Colts and he's the future there and they get back into the playoffs and win a playoff game, then it's going to look amazing. And the Eagles are going to look like the losers in this deal. But if he goes there and he doesn't do well and he looks like he did in 2020, well, the Eagles look pretty good for getting rid of him, number one, getting rid of the contract, and just saying, okay, we need to go with Hurts. We need to go with another guy here. It's not going to work. So there's both sides to this. We'll see how it plays out. in 2021. But who knows? We'll see in the season and how it progresses.
Right. By the way, the Eagles made mistakes in the past. If you want to take a step back and say, were the Eagles winners or losers in the whole Carson Wentz situation, you can say losers, although he did contribute to a Super Bowl win in the sense he gave him a really good record before Nick Foles took over. They'd never won a Super Bowl before. I'm sure a lot of Eagles fans wouldn't change the last couple of years and sacrifice that Super Bowl either. But, Stephen A., what you're saying...
Max, let me ask you a question, Max.
Yeah.
Max, if you had a Super Bowl... If you won the Super Bowl like Carson Wentz, would you put that ring on and say that you won that Super Bowl, or did you look at it like, man, I didn't win anything?
You're asking me personally?
I would look at it like I didn't win anything. I would look at it like I didn't win anything.
Yeah, but I understand what you mean.
Stephen A., exactly. I'm getting to the point of this. When he looks at that ring, he didn't win a Super Bowl. He helped the team who tore his ACL.
I get what you mean, but I'm saying fans wouldn't change the past in Philly if they had to wipe out the last 5 years. They would want everything to play out the way it was if that was take it or leave it, because they won a Super Bowl. And he did contribute. He gave him a very good record. But so I understand what you're saying. Overall, you could argue, boy, this is a loss for the Eagles. But we're talking about, given the present situation, what they just did, given the reality of the situation, I think they won. Stephen A., what you're arguing is here's a chance where Indianapolis could win. Frank Reich and DiFilippo, those are the only two, the Colts and the Bears, who looked at Wentz and said, we think we can fix him. But both reportedly thought it was a whole ground up or top down, if you start with his head, situation. They were going to have to rebuild him, not just tweak him. So it's not a coincidence that two guys who were on the coaching staff in the past when Wentz was at his best thought, yes, we can rebuild this guy, which is what it was going to take, right? That's one. Two, if Wentz goes there and Reich is correct and he can rebuild them, and Wentz then has success, and Wentz, who's been injury prone in his career, stays healthy, then you'll be right, Stephen A. A lot of things have to happen between now and then for you to say the Colts won, the Eagles lost. As of right now, the Eagles just moved an immovable contract off their books and got draft compensation for it. A second and a third right now could wind up being a second and a first.
Well, I'm not caught up on the draft picks. I'm thinking about the $33 million in dead cap space combined with a pick that may or may not end up being a first rounder. I think a lot of these teams overblow the value of these picks from time to time. If you can sit up there and trade a number 2 overall pick, why should we be so enamored with the fact that you got a second round pick or a third round pick? That's just how I view it. I'm not saying it's completely meaningless, but I don't overblow it to the degree that some NFL folks do personally. And I think Rob is absolutely right when you talk about the Eagles front office, but it ain't the ownership, because as you said and you pointed out on many occasions, Max, you still got to spend the money. So with Jeffrey Lurie, even though you got the $33 million in dead cap space, it's really up to the GM to maneuver his way around that. It's not like more additional dollars are coming out of the pocket of Jeffrey Lurie. It's just that the numbers that's coming out of his pocket, you got to figure out a way to do the right things with it if you're Howie Roseman. Now we get to the Carson Wentz situation, and let me tell you this, and Rob will verify this. Pretty easily he'll do so. Max Kellerman, if Carson Wentz had won the Super Bowl instead of Nick Foles, this city wouldn't have been so vicious towards him, even with a down year like this year. Make no mistake about it. He didn't win that ring, and he knows it. So when he came out and he came to the rescue last year and got them to the playoffs despite all of those injuries, it was definitely an accomplishment, but you still came up short because you didn't win the chip. The level of cachet that Carson Wentz would have had he not gotten hurt when he went 11-2 before going down with Frank Reich as his offensive coordinator and Doug Peterson as his head coach, if he had gone on to win the Super Bowl without Nick Foles ever needing to come in, it would have been a totally different mindset in Philadelphia about Carson Wentz, despite how awful last season was.
I think the fact of the matter is,
being injury prone combined with being ineffective and inefficient once you are healthy is a death knell. That's what happened.
I think Philly fans stuck with him too long, to tell you the truth, too. I was surprised with how Carson Wentz was not good at the end of 2019.
They didn't stick with him too long. That's what I'm saying. They didn't stick with him too long.
I'm saying the narrative in 2019 that he brought them to the playoffs, he played poorly in the second half of 2019. They got lucky. He was playing the worst division ever and not performing very well. He was turning the ball over on third down in the fourth quarter
consistently. Alshon Jeffrey was out. Nelson Aguilar was out. Deshaun Jackson was out at the time.
Well, he was playing terrible teams. I'll say this. It's not just the number. If you want to take the big picture, then I agree with you guys. It's a fiasco for the Eagles. If you want to back up Stephen A., it's not just that they used the second overall pick. They used enormous draft capital to trade up to the second overall pick to take Wentz. Of course, in the big picture. And then why do you give him the contract and then draft a quarterback in the second round, turn around within the same year? It's ridiculous. Yes, but given what they were dealing with right now, they did great.
Let me get one more topic in here. All right, let me get one more thing in here while we got Rob before we got to say goodbye on a Friday. So the Eagles likely, guys, to turn to Jalen Hurts, obviously, as their quarterback. Though they also intend to bring in competition for him. Division winners Washington football team re-signed Taylor Heineke, but also seem to be looking for a QB. Danny Dimes expected to be under center for the Giants, and the Cowboys expect to get Dak Prescott back from injury next season. It's worth noting that the Eagles have the 6th pick in the draft. But Max, tell me this, do the Eagles have the worst quarterback situation in the NFC East?
No, not at all. See, the Eagles right now are taking a look at Jalen Hurts. They want to see what they have. They'll probably bring in a veteran, give him some competition. They have a whole bunch of draft capital now. If it doesn't work out in the next year or so, they'll draft another quarterback. Washington just gave Heineke a backup money. But right now, he's their starter. And the Giants reached for Daniel Jones in that draft, took him 6th overall. He showed promise early. He showed no improvement last year. If anything, maybe a touch of regression. But obviously no improvement. And year number 2 is supposed to be your development year. And the Giants are married to him because they spent that draft capital on him. They don't give no indication they're going to move on. At least the Eagles can be flexible. I wouldn't say obviously, Prescott plays for the Cowboys. They're in the driver's seat. But I wouldn't say the Eagles have the worst situation. No, not anymore. Not now that they got rid of Wentz.
Jalen Hurts, I'm wishing him nothing but the best, and he had some really, really good moments, particularly 338 yards or so that he threw against Arizona with 3 touchdowns, threw for over 300 yards in a loss to Dallas. I get all of that, but he still completed 52% of his passes. I haven't seen the level of accuracy that I would like to see from him. The jury is still out. Even though Taylor Heineke was just a playoff game, it was just one game. It was a playoff game. It was against Tampa's defense. It was against Todd Bowles, and the man threw for 306 yards. I'm going to give credit where credit is due, and I think with Dwayne Haskins being gone, if Carson Wentz is a plus because he's subtracted from the Philadelphia Eagles situation, why isn't the Redskins a plus because Dwayne Haskins is subtracted from that particular situation? When I look at Daniel Jones, there was no Saquon Barkley. And I like what I see Joe Judge doing. I think that Joe Judge has proven to be a really, really good coach thus far. In his rookie year, I saw them get better every week. I like what I saw. And, of course, Dallas is going to get Dak Prescott back. So I consider the Eagles to be in the worst quarterback situation, at least for the immediate moment right now, particularly when they got a new head coach and Washington has Ron Rivera.
See, I disagree. I think that they're in an okay spot with Hurts. And we all saw what he did against the Saints. At the time, the best defense in the NFL. And he went out there and he carved them up and he made them look real silly. So I think that what we've seen in the last 5 years of how the NFL quarterback, the style of an NFL quarterback, he fits the mold. He can move. He can hurt you with his legs. He can throw. I think we've also been hyper-focused with the Eagles on the quarterback position, and they have draft capital. They have the 6th overall pick. So what do they need to do? They need to build some other key pieces on that roster. They're aging. They're getting older. They need a pass rusher, a tight end, a wide receiver. There's certain things that they need to address. A tackle, an offensive tackle. They have some things they need to look at with this draft capital that they did just get and go out there and help get some pieces that can help them win. So I think they're okay in the quarterback spot. Go get Fitzpatrick as a backup. He can help a young quarterback as well.
Yeah, and they have options.
Right.
They have flexibility that the Giants don't seem to want to look at, and they're certainly no worse off than Washington.
Mm-hmm. All right, Rob, thank you so much for being with us. You have a fabulous weekend, and we will talk to you next week.
Thank you.
All right. Guys, we have a new addition to